Right, time now to have a look at the stories that are making the headlines in the media right across the world. And we're going to start quite close to home. The Financial Times reporting that France and the UK are heading into a showdown with the US as big tech companies are set to be hit by new taxes. The Wall Street Journal focuses on one of those big companies, actually, Amazon, which is spending, as we said in Business Briefing, $700 million to retrain 100,000 workers who could lose their jobs to automation. A story here from the BBC News website has a look at the latest Brexit preparations and the Bank of England's announcement that British banks are well prepared for a no-deal Brexit and any trade war fallouts. Let's have a look now at the Times for a moment. All change for prisons in the UK, it would seem, as a range of rewards for well-behaved inmates are announced. Among those rewards, they would be able to cook their own meals, shower when they feel like it, and even have keys to their own cells. Finally, The Independent, among many, covering this story for you. England's thrashing or trashing of Australia, which sees them getting into the Cricket World Cup final for the first time in 27 years. It is a cup they have never won. With me is Geraint Anderson, who is a former City of London stockbroker, author of City Boy, of which is also known as a columnist. Geraint, very nice to have you with us. Let's start then with the attacks to get hold of the huge amounts of money that the likes of Facebook and Google and Amazon and the like are making out of non-American companies. It's all coming together. Yeah,
I mean, it's been a long-standing problem. We've got these sort of digital web-based companies, and they haven't got much infrastructure in our country. They generally domicile their headquarters in places that, like maybe Dublin or somewhere like that, with very low corporation tax rates, and we don't see much, or if any, of the tax revenues. And obviously they're earning hundreds of millions, so it is a bit of a scandal. The only problem with what's going on here is it will look like a direct attack on American large companies like Google, like all those Amazon and so forth, and therefore you do worry that this is going to start some kind of trade war, because it does seem quite apparent that President Trump isn't averse to putting up tariffs if he feels in any way attacked like that.
I think they've even made the point, Robert Lighthizer saying, look, do that, there will be tariffs. I mean, there'll be a price to pay. The other point being made, though, by these European countries is that they would like to see a global approach,
yes,
but it's proving desperately difficult, understandably, to get anywhere near one.
That's right. I mean, global cooperation on anything like this, especially if America's involved, would be problematic, as it always is. And so it looks like the UK and France have gone it alone, and they've just said companies that have got over a certain amount of revenue globally, maybe they are the ones that they're targeting, 400 million or so forth, and they seem like they're actually going to get 2 or 3% of the revenues associated with, in the case of France, it's 3%, 2% in England. So that's quite a lot of money, about 400 million quid coming to our way by 2022. So I think it's about time this happened. It's a great thing to happen. Just slightly worried that in a world that's getting more and more tariffs and trade wars, could be yet another nail in the coffin for trade.
Only slightly worried.
Yeah.
It just feels inevitable, doesn't it? Anyway, let's move on to... this is a really interesting story. Wall Street Journal picking up on what Amazon is doing about retraining as a third of its workforce. But it's not just Amazon. Lots of other companies are beginning to do the same thing. I suppose it's on two levels, isn't it? They've got to do it because the skills...
The robots are coming.
The robots are coming. But there's becoming a skills shortage as well, because jobs are, they're being filled in the US. It's not...
It's amazing actually, and a third of the US workforce, 100,000 employees. What the cynical part of me is saying that Jeff Bezos, Amazon, he's not someone who's doing this. He's not a charity. He's very profit driven. I'd like to see what the share price has done in response to this, or will do when the American markets open, because this is a major investment, and they don't even have to stay at Amazon. They could actually move elsewhere, and they could seemingly retrain in things that aren't necessarily associated with what you think of Amazon.
So you're not going to fall for the idea that reskilling can boost employee morale, can keep workers from leaving a company.
But they're rather soft. They are rather soft issues, and as I say, shares are driven by quarterly profits. This certainly in the near term you'd think would have a negative impact on that. So I'm all for it. It's an amazing commitment by a huge company, but the cynical side of me does wonder exactly how that will benefit, how they're going to use this.
Do you think there's anything, because it was referenced within the Wall Street Journal's article, this is a company with more than 630,000 employees, full-time and part-time, and actually this is a way of softening the truth, which is going to be massive layoffs fairly soon.
Yeah, that could be maybe answering my point about the cynical thing. Maybe this is, as you say, it's going to soften that blow. But still, it's a positive, and it's something that you don't hear very often from Wall Street companies, which are pretty rapacious and pretty ruthless.
Yeah, we were asking actually today whether people, what they would like to be reskilled as if they got an opportunity, because, if you get that opportunity, it's got to be worth taking, hasn't
Absolutely.
it? One way or the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to, here's a story which you'll be probably quite pleased about, I think. Your track record would suggest. UK banks prepared for Brexit and trade war fallout. It's not something we've heard a lot being said over the course of the last few years. Yeah. You'd see it very much as a positive. But interesting the way in which the Bank of England has laid out the levels of preparedness for the worst eventuality.
Yeah, so they've obviously made sure that the banks have got sufficient capital to deal with some serious shocks. And the worst case scenario they're talking about is the economy shrinking 4.7%, employment more than doubling to 9.5%, and property prices falling by 33%. Now, on the one hand, this is great news. Look, the banks are prepared. The Bank of England is effectively slapping itself on the back and saying, look, we've done a really good job. On the other hand, there's a part of me that goes, oh dear, this is a potential outcome from Brexit and the trade wars that are beginning to, the no-deal Brexit. So it's great news that our banks do look prepared. On the other hand, the scenarios they're envisaging do give me slight cause for concern.
And it's always on the one hand and the other hand being the bank also saying the levels of investment in markets, that's dropping significantly. Commercial property, less than 2/5 of average levels in the past 2 years.
Yes, I think, the concept that this project fear is now becoming project actually is occurring. Project fear is actually reality, project reality. And that, the point is that we were the fastest growing country in the G7 just before the referendum vote. I believe now we are the slowest, and there are some economists out there who are saying technically we have entered a recession. This will be proven about what happens in the second quarter and third quarter this year. But it looks like we are beginning to really feel an impact, and it's no longer just hypothetical. So it's a slight concern there.
Yeah, but good to know that the banks are at least getting their house in order ready for it.
At least the banks
that's
won't
what's going to happen. Yeah, exactly.
The clutching at straws.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, quite. Poor bankers. Now, the Times has this is a very interesting story. It's an entertaining story in itself, actually. The idea that inmates are in charge of their own key to their cells, they can start to do what they want if they behave better.
Yes.
It seems rather late in the day to decide that there is now evidence that shows that they behave, they respond better to being treated
Funnily
as
enough,
human beings.
It's not just the stick that's required to keep people in line. As we've known, anyone with young children know, it's actually more the carrots and incentives that. So I think the Daily Mail readers will be going apoplectic at the headlines of having the keys to your own cell, and obviously it will be done in a controlled way. I suspect, as it said in the article, sex offenders are a far more relaxed group apparently in prison than gang members, which I can imagine is true. I have to say...
So a lot of responsibility they're placing on governors actually of prisons to work this out for themselves as well.
Exactly. And the fact of the matter is that there are a record number of assaults between prisoners and from prisoners to wardens. I think they're talking about 10,000 assaults on prisoner, on warden or guard attacks, which is outrageous.
And sharply up, and that's the other point.
Massively up. And so I think that I suppose the point in life is that, yes, you, as all management theory books will tell you, you don't just have sticks, you have carrots. I do think that there is a problem with drugs in prison. So the only concern that I've got from reading about this is that if you can lock the door and then do drugs, then that's going to slightly be an issue.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. Now here's a great story.
Oh yes.
If you're English and you love cricket, or Welsh indeed.
Yes, well,
you're going to take me up on that.
That's right, because it's actually the English and Welsh cricket board. So there have been Welsh players, and everyone talks about the England team, and as a proud Welshman, I want to make it absolutely clear that there can be Welsh players in there, and there have been at least 15 over the last 80 or so
All right,
years.
you've made your point. You cannot deflect from the story, please.
Okay.
England are in the final of the World Cup.
Yes.
Haven't been there for 27 years, never won the thing. And there is a point that Sky have said, look, we are going to make this free to air because the audience is tiny, relatively speaking.
And, you know, there seems to be an element whereby cricket is in decline somewhat. There's less interest in it ever since it stopped being on BBC One or whatever it used to be. And so I think the fact that they're putting the final on non-pay TV is brilliant. And, you know, you saw what happened to the women's football. Everyone's got so invigorated by that. It's great. So I think the fact that that's happened is really commendable. And the fact is that Sunday is going to be a very interesting day here. We've got the men's Wimbledon's single final, we've got the Grand Prix, and we've got the Cricket World Cup final. It is going to be one hell of a day.
Got to stop you there, Geraint. Thank you very much indeed for that. England still have to win it, of course. Do stay with us here on BBC News. Good to have you with us.